The HOA president's gavel hit the table so hard the water glasses rattled. Remove those solar panels in 7 days or face daily fines. She barked. Half the room gasped. The other half took photos like paparazzi at a scandal. And I, sitting calmly with a folder labeled State Energy Compliance Division, simply smiled. If only she knew who she was threatening. But let's rewind. It started as a quiet Saturday morning in the new development of Willow Creek Estates, a community that prided itself on being eco-friendly, ironically enough. My wife, Lisa, and I had finally found a place to settle down. A tidy cul-de-sac with bird baths, white fences, and just enough space for my rooftop solar array project. With my state credentials as an energy inspector, I wanted to walk my talk. Renewable, efficient, independent. The panels went up in less than a week. Neat lines, professionally installed, fully permitted by the county, a model project. But by the third morning after installation, an envelope appeared on our doorstep, sealed with the signature emerald HOA logo. Inside, a notice of violation. Illegal aesthetic modification. Non-approved structure. Removal required. At first, I laughed. Somebody in the HOA must have confused me with a rule breaker. The architecture committee hadn't even looked at the solar guidelines. Outdated since 1999. But laughter faded fast once I saw the signature. Rebecca Langford, HOA president. Now, Rebecca was infamous even before I moved in. Neighbors whispered tales of her ruling the neighborhood like a suburban oligarch, finding kids for chalk drawings, scolding gardeners for non-uniform grass tones. But banning solar? That was a new level. Within days, her wrath went public. HOA newsletters calling my panels community eyesores. Anonymous printouts slipped into mailboxes, warning others not to encourage rogue installations. One morning, my front yard sign, powered by the sun, was torn in half and shoved into my mailbox. I hadn't faced this much hostility since investigating fraudulent contractors a few years prior, so I decided to treat it the same way, methodically, quietly, with receipts. Before I show you how deep this neighborhood power trip went, take a second, subscribe, so you're here when justice flips the switch. That evening, I set up my security cameras, one facing the panels, another toward the street. I also logged every email Rebecca sent to HOA members, tagging keywords like violation, penalty, and reputation. Then, a curious find. The HOA board used a private email chain for enforcement decisions, a huge red flag under state open records policies for registered nonprofits. I pulled screenshots, quietly, time-stamped, and archived. Meanwhile, I did what any citizen should, filed an official appeal using the HOA's own bylaws. The response? Rejected. Appeals are not accepted for community guideline violations. That's when I knew Rebecca wasn't just stubborn. She was manufacturing authority. Next, someone keyed my truck, a deep, deliberate cut running from headlight to taillight. My home office window, where the energy inspection badge sat on a shelf, was egged. The next morning, a neighbor nervously approached me. I heard Rebecca say, "Your panels could lower all our property values. She's trying to get a petition going." I nodded slowly, recording our talk on my phone, with permission, of course. "She even said you didn't have county approval," he added. "But when I checked the permits bulletin, your name's right there." Perfect. False claim, documented. I was building my case, brick by brick, or perhaps watt by watt. By week 3, the HOA mailed an official notice of fines. $50 per day until panels were removed. Plus, a community cleanliness penalty for decreased visual harmony. The phrasing was so absurd it could have been comedy if it weren't real money. Lisa looked nervous. "Should we just take them down until this blows over?" I shook my head. No, if bullies get to rewrite property rights, they'll keep pushing. Besides, she's about to learn the definition of energy authority compliance from the person who wrote the handbook. That night, under the soft light of my still operating panels, I wrote 3 emails to my contact at the state energy office, to an environmental law attorney named Glenn I'd worked with before, and to a local reporter who'd once interviewed me about solar access laws. The sun might have gone down, but the real power surge was just beginning. By the time my attorney friend Glenn called me back, I had an entire data folder on my desktop labeled Operation HOA Sheen. The evidence pile was beautiful. Emails, drive-by photos of Rebecca inspecting my property with a clipboard, audio clips of her spreading falsehoods about safety hazards. Glenn chuckled when he saw my organized chaos over a video call. "Dylan," he said, You're basically doing my pre-trial work for me. But listen, before we go nuclear, let's bait a little more rope. Never hurts when the rope loops itself, and bait it I did. My front cameras were already running, but I added a discreet mini camera near the HOA notice board at the clubhouse. Every suspicious posting, edited newsletter, or urgent memo that mysteriously appeared, I captured it all, metadata and timestamps included. But the gold mine? A tiny Bluetooth tracker I slipped into one of the HOA's publicly shared maintenance bags. Nothing invasive, just enough to ping my phone when it was moved. Rebecca routinely claimed she inspected communal equipment every Friday. But suddenly, the tracker like clockwork traveled down to the county zoning office every Thursday, where her brother just happened to work. That smelled like coordination, possibly falsifying county complaint forms. That's when my state energy office colleague, Carla, got involved. She reviewed the HOA's supposed energy regulation clause and nearly choked on her coffee. They cited a 1978 neighborhood beautification memo? That's not even codified law. They have zero jurisdiction over renewable infrastructure, she said. With Carla's official comment drafted and ready to file, Glenn moved us into phase 2, exposure. We'd let Rebecca keep thinking she had the upper hand until it was too late to retreat. The setup was deceptively simple. Glenn would request a formal meeting under the HOA's bylaws, presentation format, recorded minutes mandatory. Meanwhile, Carla would arrive incognito, listed as my local compliance consultant. But before that meeting, I needed one last piece of irrefutable proof that Rebecca's campaign extended beyond mere complaints into manipulation of HOA finances. Rumors floated around that she was using HOA funds to pay for consultation fees, so I went for a little walk. Late one evening, I noticed light coming through the office blinds at the clubhouse. Inside, Rebecca hunched over the HOA ledger book, pages spread like war plans. My camera zoom picked up the key page headings: enforcement expenses, solar violations fund, and under payees, her brother's name. There it was. Misappropriation, plain as day. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread that the solar rebel was showing up. Cookies on tables, forced smiles everywhere. Rebecca's gavel was ready. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "you are again in violation of community aesthetics, despite numerous warnings." "May I?" I interrupted, sliding the folder across the table. Her eyes flickered, controlled but uneasy. I opened with something gentle. "Madam President, this first document is the permit issued by the county. Stamped, approved public record." I flipped the page. "These next emails show your private enforcement chain using language inconsistent with state nonprofit procedures. And this..." I paused for effect, turning my tablet so the camera clip played. Rebecca and her brother, in a whispered exchange at the zoning office, time-stamped. Gasps filled the room. She slammed the gavel again, but Carla spoke up, cool as winter. "For the record," she said, "I'm Carla Mendoza with the State Energy Office. You are attempting to enforce jurisdiction over renewable installation contrary to State Statute 41E. You can't actually do that." Rebecca froze. It was like flipping a breaker mid-storm. Her face paled, her mouth opened, but only static came out. She tried to redirect the meeting back to procedure, but Glenn now stood, suit pristine, voice steady. "Under nonprofit code, this board can be subject to state audit for financial improprieties," he announced. "Particularly transfers made to family members." He held up a printout from my camera logs. "And the documents you signed last week are already filed with the county's ethics office." Some neighbors looked at me with wide eyes, others with quiet applause between gasps. The self-declared queen of conformity had been caught rewriting law with a Sharpie. Rebecca sputtered that everything was taken out of context. But then something even more poetic happened. The HOA treasurer, a stiff man named Ralph who had loyally seconded her motions for years, stood up. "I signed those checks because she told me they were legal reimbursements," he said, voice shaking. I'm done being responsible for this." He dropped his copy of the ledger on the table and walked out, the thud echoing like a final verdict. The small mountain of paper neatly labeled enforcement expenses looked suddenly radioactive. Neighbors were now murmuring outright, "She can't fine him." She lied to us. She used our dues for that? Rebecca tried to adjourn the meeting prematurely, but Glenn leaned forward. "Not so fast. You haven't yet officially recognized the appeal you denied unlawfully. Would you care to read it into record? For transparency?" She didn't. The gavel lay forgotten beside her trembling hand as everyone started snapping photos of the projection screen. Email headers and bank transfers glowing in high definition. Outside, I could see my panels shining faintly in the streetlights. still gathering the last embers of dusk reflection. Fitting, really, the clean light against all her shadows. But victory wouldn't be complete until the legal machine finished grinding. Glenn's report was ready to forward. Carla's statement would go public next morning through the State Energy Bulletin. And me, I wasn't done either. I had one more surprise for Rebecca, one that would ensure no HOA ever tried this stunt again. The real power surge hadn't even peaked yet. 2 days after the fateful meeting, the HOA chat boards went from gossip hubs to war zones. Neighbors who had once supported Rebecca were now demanding full disclosure of the budget. Screenshots of the ledger flew faster than spring pollen. She paid herself with our dues. One post read, "Over solar panels?" Another said, complete with laughing emojis. I wasn't celebrating, at least not openly. I had seen too many collapses of authority before to enjoy the gloating phase. Glenn reminded me to stay disciplined. You're standing in the open now. Keep the moral high ground. Let them expose themselves further. Sure enough, Rebecca tried one last desperate move. She sent a community-wide letter claiming the entire drama had been fabricated by an outsider, trying to destroy neighborhood unity. Unfortunately for her, she sent it from her HOA official email, on the same account now under investigation for misuse. Within hours, Glenn filed it as further evidence of bad faith governance. When the state regulators contacted the HOA, Rebecca folded almost instantly. The audit revealed $18,000 in unauthorized enforcement disbursements over 2 years. Her brother was formally barred from contracting with community associations. And, as for local law, the county prosecutor added the cherry on top, an ethics violation charge for falsifying public complaints. During the next official HOA meeting, residents filled every seat. You could sense the electric hum of anticipation, the kind that precedes both storms and reckoning. Rebecca sat stiffly at the end of the long table, cheeks drawn tight, eyes scanning a script she'd written for herself. I have decided, she began in a quivering voice, to step down as president, effective immediately. The room erupted, not with applause, but with relieved murmurs of disbelief. It was over. The suburban tyrant had resigned. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached to thank me for standing up for fairness. I finally decided they deserved to know the full story. Just so you understand, I said. I wasn't only defending my property, I was performing my job. One curious man blinked. Your job? I smiled, opening my wallet and flashing the badge I'd kept discreetly tucked away. State Energy Infrastructure Compliance Inspector. The logo gleamed under the fluorescent light like a dawn-breaking gasps again. One neighbor laughed out loud. So the whole time she was messing with a state official? Essentially, I said. I didn't want to pull rank, but she forced my hand. She got a practical lesson in renewable energy law. Even Ralph, the repentant treasurer, found me afterward. Guess you really put the power back in Power Authority, huh? He joked, half embarrassed, half admiring. I grinned. Let's just say I prefer sunlight to politics. And now we've got both. The new interim board quickly reversed Rebecca's so-called solar ban. They even asked me to help draft the Willow Creek Renewable Integration Policy, ensuring no one else would face punitive restrictions for sustainable installations. What had started as a petty fight over appearances had recharged into an education on property rights and accountability. But Rebecca's backfire was still glowing. Local news caught wind. The story ran under the headline, HOA President Penalized After Attempting to Fine State Energy Inspector. The irony helped the piece go mildly viral. My inbox filled with messages from other homeowners thanking me for standing up to HOA abuse. Late one evening, I stood in my driveway, the panels above quiet but alive, drinking in moonlight like calm sentinels. Lisa came out with a mug of tea. You know, she said, if that HOA meeting had been a movie, no one would have believed it. Oh, they would, I replied, staring up at the glistening frames, because everyone's met a Rebecca somewhere. People who mistake control for order, complaint for leadership. She nudged me gently. So what happens now, Mr. Energy Inspector? Now? I chuckled. We enjoy lower electric bills and slightly higher neighborhood sunlight literacy. A few weeks later, during my usual state inspection route, I passed by the county records office. There, pinned on the public notice board, was the newly filed HOA ordinance update, authored jointly by the new board and the State Energy Office. It began simply, homeowners shall not be prohibited or penalized for lawful installation of renewable energy systems. I couldn't help but smile. The very language that Rebecca tried to weaponize had now transformed into community protection. Her own rulebook, rewritten by the people she'd tried to silence. As the sun broke through scattered clouds, its light reflected off a dozen new solar panels across the neighborhood. Evidently, others had taken inspiration. Justice, it seemed, was contagious and best served sustainably. In the end, the saga of Willow Creek became more than an HOA squabble. It became a reminder that transparency is the ultimate disinfectant. Harassment thrives in shadow, but sunlight, well, sunlight powers everything. So if anyone ever tells you to dim your light, figuratively or literally, remember my panels, my paperwork, and my stubborn refusal to play small, because sometimes the best revenge against small-minded rules is to shine so brightly the rules melt away.